Daniel Carter woke up that Tuesday believing it would be like every other day he had lived for years. The alarm rang at 6:30. The sky outside his Seattle apartment was gray, heavy with clouds. He showered, dressed, and drank coffee that tasted more bitter than usual. Nothing felt wrong, but nothing felt alive either. His life moved forward in straight lines, safe, predictable, quiet. He had learned to live that way after losing something important years ago. Since then, emotions stayed controlled, memories stayed buried, and expectations stayed low. At 36, Daniel had built a stable life. He worked as an architect for a mid-sized firm respected by colleagues, trusted by clients. He paid his bills on time, called his parents every Sunday, and kept his apartment clean. On the outside, everything looked complete. On the inside, there was a quiet space he never spoke about. He told himself that some people were not meant for big feelings. He believed that love was something he had already lived once, and losing it had been enough. That morning, his manager asked him to attend a one-day professional seminar in Vancouver. It was short notice and unimportant. Daniel agreed without thinking. Travel felt easier than staying still. By noon, he was on a train heading north, carrying a laptop bag and no expectations. The train was calm, filled with people working, reading, or staring out the window. Daniel sat by the glass, watching the city slowly turn into trees and open land. He put on his headphones, not to listen to music, but to avoid conversation. He had mastered the art of being unavailable at the next stop. The door opened and someone took the empty seat across from him. He barely noticed at first. Then something changed. Daniel looked up just for a second and saw a woman adjusting her bag. She moved carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb anyone. She wore a simple coat, jeans, and carried a notebook that looked well used. Her hair was tied back loosely, and a few strands fell near her face. There was nothing dramatic about her appearance. Yet Daniel felt a sudden awareness, like the room had shifted. He looked away quickly, confused by the feeling. His heart beat faster, not with fear, but with recognition he couldn't explain. He told himself it was nothing, just a stranger. Just a moment. The woman sat quietly, reading, occasionally writing notes. Daniel noticed small details without meaning to. When thinking, the calm way she breathed, the patience in her posture. He had not paid attention to anyone like this in years. She looked up at one point, meeting his eyes by accident. She smiled politely, warm but brief. Daniel nodded back, unsure why his chest felt tight. The train moved on. Time felt strange. The silence between them was comfortable, almost shared. Daniel tried to focus on his laptop, but his thoughts wandered. He wondered where she was going. He wondered if she noticed him too. He wondered why his mind refused to stay quiet. At the Vancouver station, they both stood at the same time. The coincidence made him smile inside. They walked in the same direction toward a small cafe inside the terminal. The line was long, slow, and filled with tired travelers. When the coffee machine stopped working, a soft laugh broke the air. Daniel turned and realized it was her. "Of course," she said lightly, shaking her head. "That feels about right." Daniel smiled without planning to. "Rough morning." She looked at him, surprised, then nodded. "Yeah, long week already." "Same," he replied. "And it's only Tuesday." She laughed again, more openly this time. The conversation was simple, natural. There was no effort. Her name was Emily Ross. She worked in nonprofit education, helping communities with learning programs. She traveled often, but preferred quiet places. Daniel told her about architecture, about how buildings carried stories, about how he liked designing spaces meant for calm rather than attention. They spoke as if they had already met before, not because they shared history, but because they shared ease. Daniel felt himself relaxing, speaking honestly without fear. Emily listened closely, like his words mattered. The line moved faster. Soon they had coffee in their hands. The moment felt fragile, temporary. "I should get going," Emily said gently. "My seminar starts soon." Mine too, Daniel replied, not wanting the conversation to end. They walked together toward the exit. The air outside was cool and fresh. People passed by, busy and unaware of the quiet connection forming between two strangers. It was really nice meeting you. Emily said, meaning it. Yeah, Daniel answered. It was. There was a pause. A small one. The kind where decisions are made quickly or lost forever. Would you like to stay in touch? Emily asked, almost casually. Daniel didn't hesitate. I'd like that. They exchanged numbers. No promises. No pressure. Just a shared understanding that this meeting mattered, Emily waved and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Daniel stood still for a moment. Watching until she was gone, something inside him shifted. He walked to his seminar, but his mind stayed behind. He listened to speakers without hearing them. He took notes without remembering them. His thoughts returned to Emily again and again, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady presence. That evening, back on the train to Seattle, phone vibrated.emily. I'm glad we talked today. Safe travels. Daniel stared at the message longer than necessary. He typed back, Daniel, me too. Today felt different. The reply came quickly. Emily, I was thinking the same thing. As the train moved through the dark, Daniel leaned back and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he did not feel guarded. He did not feel afraid of tomorrow. He felt awake. He didn't know where this would lead. He didn't know what it would cost. But he knew one thing with complete certainty. He had never experienced this in his life. And from that day on, nothing felt ordinary anymore. Daniel did not expect the message to change the rhythm of his days, but it did. After that first night, texting Emily became natural, almost necessary. They did not talk all the time. Yet, when they did, the conversations felt real. There was no pretending, no trying to impress. They spoke between meetings during short walks, late at night when the world felt quiet. Each message carried calm, not pressure. Emily asked thoughtful questions. She wanted to know why Daniel chose architecture, what kind of spaces made him feel safe, what he did when he felt tired of the world. Daniel answered honestly. He told her about growing up in Oregon before moving to Seattle, about losing someone he once planned a future with, about how he learned to live carefully after that. Emily never pushed. She listened, and her understanding made him feel seen in a way he had forgotten was possible. Emily shared her own life slowly. She talked about her work in education, about helping adults return to learning after years of struggle. She spoke about moving cities, about relationships that ended because timing never felt right. She admitted she often felt strong on the outside, but unsure inside. Daniel recognized that feeling. It made him feel closer to her. Days moved quickly. Calls replaced texts. Their voices became familiar. Daniel noticed how her tone changed when she was tired, how she paused before speaking when something mattered. Emily noticed how Daniel grew quiet when he was thinking deeply, how his voice softened when he spoke about meaning rather than success. One evening, Emily called unexpectedly. Her voice was calm but heavy. Do you ever feel like you're always moving forward, she asked, but still carrying old weight? Daniel sat down, understanding the question immediately. All the time, he said. There was silence, not uncomfortable, just honest. I'm scared of getting attached, Emily said. Not because of you. Because of myself. Daniel felt the truth of her words. I'm scared too, he replied. But I don't want fear to make choices for me anymore. That night, neither of them said more, but something settled between them. A quiet agreement to keep going, even if slowly. A month later, Emily visited Seattle for work. They decided to meet. Daniel waited outside a small cafe near the water, hands in his coat pockets, feeling nervous in a way he hadn't felt in years. When Emily walked toward him, smiling but unsure, time seemed to pause. They greeted each other simply. No dramatic words. Just a shared look that said they were glad to be there. They walked along the waterfront, the sound of water and city life surrounding them. Conversation flowed easily. They talked about small things, laughed at random moments, shared food without thinking. Being together felt natural, as if the weeks of talking had prepared them for this moment. As evening arrived, the air grew cooler. They stopped near a quiet overlook where the city lights reflected on the water. Emily leaned on the railing, watching the view. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, "about us." Daniel nodded. "Me too. I don't want this to be something rushed," she continued. "But I don't want to pretend it doesn't matter either." Daniel turned toward her. "It matters to me." She looked at him, eyes steady. "I've never felt understood this quickly before." Daniel felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with emotion he had avoided for years. "I never experienced this in my life," he said. "But that day on the train changed something in me." Emily breathed out slowly, as if letting go of something heavy. They didn't touch. They didn't promise anything. They stood together, sharing the moment, knowing it was important. After that night, their connection deepened. They continued talking, meeting when schedules allowed. Some days were easy, filled with laughter and comfort. Other days were quiet, thoughtful, full of reflection. They learned each other's patterns, each other's fears, each other's hopes. Daniel began to notice changes in himself. He looked forward to mornings. He found inspiration in his work again. He designed spaces that felt warmer, more open. Emily encouraged him without pushing, believed in him without asking for proof. Emily changed too. She spoke more openly at work. She allowed herself to hope. She stopped treating closeness as something temporary. One night during a long call, Emily spoke honestly. "I'm afraid this could hurt," she said, "but I'm more afraid of walking away from something real." Daniel understood completely. "Whatever happens," he said, "meeting you has already changed me." There was comfort in those words, not sadness. They met again months later, this time in Portland. The city felt quiet, reflective. They walked through neighborhoods, shared stories, sat in silence when words felt unnecessary. The connection felt stronger, but also more serious. They both knew feelings had grown deeper. On the last evening, they sat in a small park as the sun set. Emily looked thoughtful. "What if this becomes something that changes us forever?" she asked. Daniel smiled softly. "Some things are meant to." They didn't define the future. They didn't plan far ahead. They chose honesty instead of certainty. As they said goodbye, standing close but still careful, Daniel felt gratitude rather than fear. No matter what happened next, he knew this was real. As Emily walked away, Daniel realized something important. Love did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrived quietly, on an ordinary day, and asked for courage instead of certainty. And that choice to stay open was the bravest thing he had ever done.